The night I realized my wife was nothing but a lying whore, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask why. I just stared at the evidence of her betrayal and thought, all right then, if this is the game you want to play, I'll burn your whole damn world down. This wasn't some cheesy movie moment where you catch a lipstick stain or smell cheap cologne on a shirt. No. What I walked in on was much worse. She was in our bedroom, suitcase open, packing for what she called a business trip. And what did I see laid out on our bed? A skimpy nurse outfit, a damn nun costume. Yeah, a nun costume, I couldn't make this up, and a fresh box of 12 condoms. Well, like she wasn't just planning a fling. She was preparing for a marathon. That was the second my marriage died. Not the first time she slept with him. Not the first time she lied to my face. No, the exact moment I saw those costumes and that box of condoms, I buried every ounce of love I had for her. What replaced it wasn't sadness, wasn't heartbreak. It was something colder. Something sharper. Revenge. And before I tell you how I tore her entire life apart piece by piece, let me pause real quick. If you love brutal stories of betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the rest of this story, because trust me, it's about to get a whole lot darker. Alright. Back to it. I stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame like nothing was wrong, and asked, "So, big meeting out of town?" She froze for a second, just a split second, but long enough for me to catch it. Then she forced a smile, the same fake one I'd seen her use on her boss whenever she wanted a favor, and said, "Yeah, just boring paperwork stuff." I nodded, biting my tongue so I wouldn't laugh. "Don't forget your laptop," I added, glancing at the lingerie and the condoms. She actually giggled. Can you believe that? She giggled like I was some clueless idiot. "Oh, I'll manage," she said, zipping up the suitcase. Inside I was boiling. But outside? I played it cool. That night we had dinner like normal. I asked about her day. I kissed her goodnight. I even told her to have a safe trip, as if I didn't know she was about to fly across the state to let another man do things to her she never did for me. But here's what she didn't know. The second she closed that door tomorrow morning, she wouldn't be leaving behind her husband. She'd be leaving behind a man with a plan. A man who was about to end her little fantasy life forever. Later that night, when she was in the shower, I slipped back into the bedroom. The sound of running water gave me cover. I walked to the suitcase, opened it slowly, and stared at that shiny box of condoms. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I grabbed the box, pulled out a thin sewing needle from my desk, and carefully, one by one, poked tiny holes in half the condoms. Not all of them. Just enough. I wanted the odds stacked, not obvious. I wanted her to think she was in control, when in reality, I had already set the trap. See, I didn't just want to catch her cheating. I wanted her lies to collapse on top of her so violently that there'd be no way she could crawl out. I wasn't after a clean break. I was after destruction. I slid the box back exactly where it had been, zipped the suitcase, and slipped out before she even turned off the water. By the time she climbed into bed, smelling like that expensive shower gel she only used when she wanted to feel sexy, I was already lying there in the dark, smiling. Because she thought she had me fooled. She thought she was walking out of the house tomorrow to chase her little fantasy and come back to a safe, clueless husband waiting with open arms. But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know her perfect little plan was already bleeding out, right there in that suitcase. And if you think this is brutal already, you haven't heard anything yet. People ask me sometimes, why didn't you just confront her? Why didn't you scream, throw her stuff on the lawn, file for divorce, and walk away? Because that's what she expected. That's what every cheater expects. Big fight, tears, drama. And then maybe, just maybe, a clean escape. She wanted me to blow up so she could play the victim. She wanted to spin the story, cry to her friends, and say, "Oh, he was so cruel, so controlling, so angry, I had no choice but to leave." No, not me. She wasn't going to write the ending. I was. See, a cheater lives in lies. They thrive in shadows. If you shine a flashlight on them, they scatter, they hide, they twist the story. But if you cut the power to the whole damn house, they can't move. They can't breathe. They're trapped. That's what I wanted, not confrontation, obliteration. So I sat there that night holding that box of condoms, and I thought about my options. I could toss them, sure. I could throw the whole suitcase out the window. But that would give her a warning. That would give her time to scramble, to lie, to cover her tracks. Instead I smiled. Because I realized something. The very tools she packed to betray me, I could use them as weapons against her. I grabbed my needle, and with steady hands I pressed it into the thin latex of the first condom. A tiny pinprick. Invisible to the eye. But enough. I did it again and again, working my way through half the pack. Not all, because all would be too obvious. Just enough to load the dice in my favor. Every prick of the needle felt like a release. Every tiny hole was a piece of my anger turned into action. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't breaking things. I wasn't losing control. I was calm, cold, precise. And in that calmness I found power. She thought she was in control of the situation. She thought she could juggle two lives, me the stable husband and him the dirty secret. But now the risk wasn't mine. It was hers. Every time she opened that box, every time they reached for one, the future shifted. A loaded gun with half the chambers full. And here's the part that might shock you. I didn't do it because I wanted a baby to come out of it. I wasn't looking to trap her forever with another man's kid. That wasn't the point. The point was chaos, exposure, consequences. I wanted her to look in the mirror one day and realize the empire of lies she built collapsed because she was too blind to see what was right in front of her. After I finished, I carefully tucked the box back into the suitcase. I zipped it shut, smoothed the top, and walked away like nothing had happened. She'd never know until it was too late. I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled on her phone, pretending to text about work. I could hear the little clicks of her keyboard, the fake sighs when I looked over. My fists clenched under the blanket, but I didn't let it show. Because now I had something she didn't: control. The morning came and she was all smiles. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd miss me, and rolled her suitcase out the door. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, and watched her drive away thinking, you have no idea. You think you're walking into a weekend of fun. But really? You're walking into a trap you'll never escape. The second her car disappeared, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel sad. I just picked up my phone, sat down at the kitchen table, and started digging. Because now it was time to find him. The man she was risking everything for. The man she thought was better than me. And once I had his number, I knew exactly what I was going to say. But that part? That's where the story really starts to burn. The morning she left for her so-called business trip, you'd think she was the perfect wife. Smiling, cheerful, acting like nothing in the world was wrong. She came down the stairs in her favorite blazer, suitcase rolling behind her. She looked polished, professional, exactly like the hard-working, dedicated woman everyone thought she was. If you didn't know what I knew, you'd think she was the poster child for a successful career woman. But me? All I saw was a liar in heels. Don't wait up, she said, leaning in to give me a kiss on the cheek. Her lips brushed mine like it was nothing. Like she hadn't packed a damn nun costume and a dozen condoms in that suitcase. I smiled back, playing my part. Of course not. You go handle your business, babe. She actually blushed. Blushed. That fake little act she pulled when she wanted me to believe she was still the sweet woman I'd married. But behind those eyes, I knew she was laughing at me. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger. Here's the thing, acting like I didn't know the truth, it gave me more satisfaction than screaming ever could. I poured her a cup of coffee, asked if she needed cash, even carried her suitcase to the car. On the outside, I was the doting husband. On the inside, I was the executioner sharpening my blade. When she got in the car, she leaned out the window and said, "Love you," like it meant something. I waved, my face calm, and said, "Love you too." And as she drove down the street, I whispered under my breath, "Not anymore." I watched her car disappear, then stood there for a long moment in the driveway, letting the silence sink in. That was the last time she'd ever leave this house as my wife. She just didn't know it yet. The neighborhood was quiet that morning. Birds chirping, sunlight spilling over the rooftops, the world moving on like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. Because while she thought she was heading off to a secret adventure, I was already moving into phase 2 of my plan. I walked back inside, sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee, and pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking. My pulse wasn't racing. I was calm. Ice cold. See, people think revenge is rage. That it's messy, loud, violent. But real revenge? It's quiet. It's surgical. It's knowing your enemy is laughing today but will be crying tomorrow, and letting them walk straight into their own downfall. I opened her call history, scrolling through the numbers she'd dialed the most. It didn't take long. There it was. A number saved with no name, just digits. Dozens of calls at odd hours. Late nights. Early mornings. I didn't need to be a detective to know who it belonged to. I tapped the number and saved it into my contacts. Not as his real name. Not even as unknown. No, I saved it as Dead Man Walking. Just seeing it in my phone made me grin. But I didn't call him yet. Timing was everything. Right now she was still on the road, still believing she had the upper hand. No, I wasn't going to blow it too soon. I wanted her to settle into her little fantasy first, to get comfortable, to feel safe. So instead I spent the day preparing. I cleaned up the house, boxed up some of her things and started stacking them in the garage. Every photo of us together, every framed memory, weighed nothing in my hands. Just junk. Pieces of a life I no longer wanted. The act of packing wasn't painful. It was liberating. Every box sealed was another reminder. I wasn't her fool anymore. I wasn't the man waiting at home while she laughed behind my back. I was the storm she never saw coming. When evening came, I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch and stared at my phone. Her lover's number stared back at me from the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I held back. Not yet. Not tonight. No, the call would come tomorrow. And when it did, it wouldn't just shake him. It would set fire to both of their lives. For now, I raised my glass, took a slow sip and whispered to myself, "Enjoy your little trip, sweetheart. Tomorrow the real journey begins." The next morning, I didn't wake up as her husband anymore. I woke up as her executioner. She was gone, off to her little getaway, thinking she'd fooled me. And me? I had my coffee, my phone, and the one number that mattered. Dead man walking. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the call button. I knew once I pressed it there was no going back. This wasn't some petty prank. This wasn't a jealous outburst. This was war. And I was about to declare it. I took a deep breath, pressed call and raised the phone to my ear. One ring. Two rings. Then a groggy voice answered. Hello. There he was. The man my wife was willing to burn our marriage for. The man she thought was better than me. Good morning, I said calmly. You don't know me, but I think you've been spending a lot of time with my wife. Silence. The kind that drips with guilt. He didn't hang up. He didn't deny it. He just froze. I could hear his breathing pick up on the other end. So I smiled and continued. I won't waste your time. I just wanted to say, congratulations. You're going to be a dad. The sound he made, it wasn't a word. More like a choked cough, half shock, half panic. What the hell are you talking about? You heard me, I said, my voice steady. Those condoms you've been using? Let's just say, they weren't as safe as you thought. I made sure of that. Another silence. Then a whisper, You did what? I gave you a gift, I said. A little reminder that actions have consequences. And here's the best part. When the test comes back positive, you won't know if the baby is yours or mine. That's what happens when you crawl into another man's marriage. Now his voice cracked, anger and fear bleeding through. You're insane. No, I said, almost laughing. I'm patient. See, you thought you were clever. You thought you could sneak around, live a double life. But I've been 10 steps ahead the whole time. He started cursing, telling me to screw off, but I cut him off. Here's what you are going to do, I said coldly. You're going to pass a message to my wife. Tell her she's homeless. Every last piece of her junk is packed and waiting for her on your lawn. She doesn't live here anymore. The line went dead quiet. I imagined him sitting there, phone in hand, sweating bullets, realizing his whole secret world just collapsed. And then he hung up. I lowered my phone, leaned back in my chair and let the satisfaction sink in. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. I was calm, steady, and in control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt powerful. I pictured him telling her the news. I pictured her face when he repeated my words, "You're homeless." That moment alone was worth every ounce of pain she had put me through. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because words are one thing. Actions? They hit harder. And soon, both of them were about to find out just how far I was willing to go. I thought that after my first call, he'd try to ignore me. Maybe block the number. Maybe pretend it never happened. But less than an hour later, my phone lit up. Dead Man Walking was calling me back. I laughed out loud. He couldn't help himself. Fear makes people stupid. I let it ring twice before I answered, calm as ever. Morning again, I said, sipping my coffee. You sound stressed. His voice was frantic, shaky. What the hell is wrong with you? Do you realize what you've done? Of course, I replied smoothly. I've done exactly what I meant to do. What's wrong? Don't like surprises. You're insane, he shouted. Messing with people's lives like this, you can't just... I cut him off, my tone dropping low. You think I care about your life? You think I give a damn about what happens to you? You crawled into my marriage. You used my wife like your plaything. And now you want sympathy? He went silent for a second, breathing hard. Then he tried to turn it around. Look, man. I didn't even know she was married, okay? She didn't tell me. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Oh, that's rich. So you expect me to believe that a grown man was stupid enough to spend nights with her, see the tan line from the ring she conveniently took off, and never once suspect anything? Save it. You're not a victim. You're her partner in crime. And now you both get to choke on the fallout. His voice cracked, lower this time. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. I already told you. You're just the messenger. Here's your one job. Tell her she's homeless. Tell her her bags are packed, her clothes are in boxes, and her whole life is waiting for her on your front lawn. And when you do, look her in the eye and remember this. I played both of you like clowns. I could practically hear him sweating on the other end. His breathing grew shallow. Then in a weak voice he said, You're sick. No, I said softly, almost whispering. I'm free. There was a long silence. Then he muttered, She's going to lose it. Good, I replied. She should. Because she lost me the second she thought I was too blind to notice. And you? You lost the second you picked up her call. Now the two of you get to live with that. He tried to say something else, but his voice cracked and then, click. He hung up again. I sat there at the table, phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen. For the first time in months I felt light. Not happy. Not relieved. But lighter. Like I had just dropped the weight she'd been piling on me. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Words had been spoken, the gauntlet had been thrown. Now it was time for action. Real, tangible action she couldn't deny or twist around. I stood up, grabbed the first box I'd packed and hauled it out to my car. Then another. And another. The garage was full of her junk and I was determined to empty it. Each load felt like ripping another piece of her out of my life. Shoes, clothes, purses, makeup, trinkets, garbage. All of it. By the time I was done, my car was stacked so high I could barely see out the rearview mirror. And as I slammed the trunk shut, I thought about her sitting in some hotel room with him, laughing, sipping wine, pretending she was untouchable. That fantasy was about to end. Because tonight she wasn't coming home to me. She was coming home to nothing. You'd be surprised how easy it is to erase someone from your life when you've already erased them from your heart. That morning, after the second call with her lover, I stood in the garage surrounded by boxes. The air smelled like cardboard and dust. Her stuff was piled everywhere, shoes stacked in the corner, handbags lined up on the shelves, clothes hanging neatly in the closet. For years, I'd looked at those things as part of our life together. Now, they were just junk. I grabbed the first armful of clothes and tossed them into a box. No folding, no careful packing. Just stuffed in like trash. Designer dresses, cocktail outfits, fancy shoes she'd begged me to buy, things I once thought made her happy. None of it mattered anymore. To me it was all the same, fabric and plastic that belonged to a stranger. With each box I sealed I felt lighter. It was almost therapeutic. Every strip of packing tape was like sealing off a chapter of my life I'd never have to read again. I moved fast. I wasn't sentimental. The wedding dress? Boxed. Photos of us smiling in fake happiness? Boxed. Her collection of makeup and perfumes? Dumped in without a second thought. Even the little trinkets she'd picked up on vacations, souvenirs she used to brag about, straight into the pile. At one point I stopped and looked at our wedding photo. The glass was still intact, her smile frozen in a lie. I took a deep breath, smashed it face down on the concrete floor, and slid the broken frame into a box. That, right there, was the only moment all morning that made me laugh out loud. The house got quieter as her presence disappeared. Every room I cleared out felt like I was pulling poison from a wound. The closet, once packed with her dresses, was suddenly empty. The bathroom counter, once cluttered with her makeup, was bare. For the first time in years the house felt like mine. I didn't even care where I tossed her things. Kitchen gadgets, jewelry, her laptop bag, even the gifts she'd given me. All of it went into boxes. Every single reminder of her was stripped from the walls and shelves. I worked for hours, sweat dripping down my back, but I didn't feel tired. If anything, I felt alive. Like I was purging the disease that had been rotting me from the inside. When I was finished, the garage looked like a moving company had set up shop. Towering stacks of taped-up boxes lined the walls. My car was packed to the brim. I stood there for a moment, looking at the mountain of her life crammed into cardboard, and I realized something. She thought she was clever, sneaking around playing games. But in reality she was disposable. Replaceable. Nothing more than clutter to be swept away. I grabbed one last box, her jewelry case. She treasured it, always locking it away like it was gold. I opened it, stared at the glittering necklaces and rings, then snapped it shut. "You won't be needing these," I muttered, throwing it on top of the pile in the trunk. When everything was loaded, I dusted off my hands and looked around the empty garage. It was spotless. Pure. Free. I checked my watch. She was probably still out, probably still laughing, still pretending she was untouchable. That made it even better. Because when she finally came back, she wouldn't find a home waiting. She'd find nothing. And soon, her lover's neighbors would see exactly what kind of woman she really was. Because the next step wasn't keeping her junk in my garage. No. The next step was delivery. Straight to his front lawn. There's a certain satisfaction in taking out the trash. Especially when the trash walks around in high heels and calls itself your wife. By the time I loaded the last box into my car, the sun was high and the street was alive with neighbors mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, people living their normal, innocent little lives. None of them knew I was about to stage a scene they'd never forget. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove. My car felt heavier than ever, stacked with her lies in cardboard form. Every bump in the road made something rattle in the back. Shoes, purses, bottles of perfume clinking together like ghosts of a marriage that never really existed. It wasn't a long drive. I knew his address. I'd found it easily enough. One late-night search through her messages was all it took. And now I was pulling onto his street, calm as ever. His house sat there like some suburban paradise. White picket fence, neatly trimmed hedges, the kind of place where people waved at each other on Sunday mornings. You wanted to play family man while screwing mine? Fine. Let him try to play family man with this pile of garbage dumped at his doorstep. I parked right in front of his house. Didn't care if anyone saw. In fact, I wanted them to see. I opened the trunk, grabbed the first box and dropped it squarely on his lawn. Then another. And another. Each one hit the grass with a satisfying thud. Shoes scattered. Clothes spilled. A pile of makeup bags fell open, lipsticks rolling down his driveway. I stacked her handbags like trophies, lined up her heels like they were on display. Every piece of her life lay bare in front of his perfect little home. A few neighbors started peeking through curtains. One old lady across the street actually stepped out onto her porch, holding a cup of coffee, watching me like it was the best entertainment she'd had all year. I didn't rush. No, I made it a performance. Each box I carried, I set down carefully, almost ceremoniously. This wasn't just moving her stuff. This was her public execution. The final touch. I pulled out the smashed wedding photo. The glass cracked, our smiles frozen in fake happiness. I set it right on top of the tallest stack, the broken frame catching the sunlight like a warning flare. There you go, I muttered under my breath. All yours now. I stepped back, wiped the sweat from my forehead and admired my work. His lawn looked like a garage sale of betrayal. And I made damn sure it was obvious whose life had just been dumped there. That's when I noticed a curtain shift. His curtain. Someone inside was watching. Maybe him. Maybe his wife. Hell, maybe both. Didn't matter. They saw me. They knew. I raised a hand in a mock wave, got back in my car, and drove off without a second glance. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of the scene. Boxes piled high, clothes spilling everywhere, the shattered wedding photo shining in the sun. Neighbors whispering. Heads turning. The story already spreading like wildfire. By the time she got back from her little business trip, her entire life would be waiting for her at another man's doorstep. Not hidden. Not private. On full display. And that, to me, was the sweetest part of the revenge. Because some betrayals don't deserve quiet endings. They deserve to be broadcast. And I just made sure hers was. The house was quiet when I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. I didn't get up. I didn't rush to the window like I used to when she came home. I just sat there in the living room sipping a drink, waiting. Almost relaxed. Because I knew the storm was about to walk through that front door, and for once I wasn't the one caught in it. The door swung open and there she was. My wife. Same professional blazer, same suitcase she'd left with, only this time her smile was gone. She looked around, confused. Something didn't feel right to her. The house was too empty. Too bare. The walls were stripped clean, the closets gutted, the bathroom counters empty. Her eyes narrowed. Where are my things? I leaned back on the couch, crossed my arms and smiled. You mean your costumes? Your makeup? Your boxes of lies? Her jaw dropped. What the hell is this supposed to mean? It means, I said calmly, you don't live here anymore. For a moment she just stared at me frozen. Then the panic set in. She stormed down the hallway, flinging open doors, checking closets, pulling open drawers. Nothing. Every last trace of her was gone. I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs, heard the frantic rustling as she tore through the bedroom. And then silence. She came back down slowly, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice cracking. I shrugged. "Delivered." Her eyes darted to me wide. "Delivered? Delivered where?" I leaned forward, met her stare, and said the words I'd been waiting for. "Ask your boyfriend. He knows." The color drained from her face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. You didn't?" she stammered. "Oh, I did," I said, almost laughing. "Go ahead. Drive over there. Take a look at his front lawn. Tell me what you see." She shook her head, backing up toward the door. "You're insane. You've lost it." "No," I said firmly, my voice like ice. "I just woke up." She stood there for a moment, trembling, and then she bolted. The door slammed behind her, her heels clicking on the driveway as she ran back to her car. I walked to the window and watched as she sped off, tires squealing, heading straight for the man she thought would save her. I imagined the scene, her pulling up, seeing her entire life dumped in front of his house, neighbors whispering, his wife staring, and him trying to explain. That was the beauty of it. I didn't even have to be there to watch her world collapse. It was already happening without me lifting a finger. I turned away from the window, sat back down on the couch, and took another sip of my drink. For the first time in a long time, the house felt peaceful. Quiet. Mine. And out there, somewhere on that perfect little suburban street, my wife was about to realize just how thoroughly she'd lost. The silence in my house didn't last long. It was barely an hour after she'd stormed out when my phone buzzed again. I expected it to be her, screaming, begging, bargaining. But it wasn't her number. It was a woman's. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. But something inside me said I should. So I answered. "Hello." A calm, steady voice replied. Not my wife's. Not her lover's. It was softer but sharper. A voice that carried weight. "Is this her husband?" she asked. My stomach dropped. I knew instantly who it was. His wife. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just held the phone to my ear, waiting. She broke the silence. "I saw what you did. The boxes on my lawn. The photo. Everything." I closed my eyes, a smirk tugging at my lips. "Good. Then you know exactly who you're married to." There was a pause, and then she let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, believe me, I've known for a long time." Her words hit harder than I expected. My grip on the phone tightened. "You knew?" "Yes," she said coldly. "I've known for months. Maybe longer. You think you were the only one getting played? No. I've been living with his lies just as much as you've been living with hers." I sat there in silence, my mind racing. I'd pictured her as innocent, blind, a victim of his games. But no, she wasn't blind. She wasn't naive. She was surviving. Just like me. And then she said something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Listen," she continued, her voice lower now. "I don't care about your wife. I don't care what happens to her. But there's something you need to know. Something about him." My chest tightened. My heart started pounding again, but not from anger this time. From anticipation. "What about him?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, like she was deciding whether or not to pull the trigger. Then she spoke, slow and deliberate. "When his wife told me that." When I hung up that call with his wife, I just sat there in silence. The room felt heavy, but for the first time in years, it wasn't the weight of betrayal crushing me. It was the weight lifting off my shoulders. Because in that moment I realized something. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I was free. See, for months I'd been living in her shadow, working extra hours, giving her everything while she played games behind my back. And the worst part? I thought I was the one failing. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. But no. The truth was simple. She was never worthy of me. And once I saw that, once I tore her world apart and handed it back to her in cardboard boxes, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Was it messy? Sure. Was it brutal? Absolutely. But sometimes betrayal doesn't deserve a quiet exit. Sometimes you have to flip the table and show people what happens when they mistake your kindness for weakness. I don't regret it. Not one bit. Watching her run off to her lover, only to find her life dumped on his lawn, exposed in front of his wife, his neighbors, and the whole damn street, that was justice. That was closure. And me? I didn't just survive. I grew. I learned to stop giving second chances to people who don't deserve first ones. I learned that revenge isn't about cruelty, it's about taking your power back. Now the house is mine. Quiet. Clean. Free of her lies. I sleep better. I eat better. I live better. Because sometimes the only way to rebuild yourself is to burn the old life down. And that's exactly what I did. So now I'll leave it to you. Did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Hit that like button and drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Because trust me, this was just one story. And there are plenty more where that came from.